What piece of advice would you give them on navigating this environment, this climate?
Well, and when you're talking about claims, the cornerstone of the claims for both from the FDA and the FTC standpoint is your
Hmm.
claims should always be truthful and not
Hmm.
misleading. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and we talk through this with clients all the time. The stronger your claims are, the stronger your data to support that claim should be.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's segment here on the Product and Packaging Powerhouse. I am your show host, Megan Young Gamble, and Chief Project Officer at GLC, your packaging and project execution team. And let me just say, if you've been launching products out here, and you're thinking about what needs to be on there, but you're not quite sure what the regulatory compliance market looks like, this is the episode for you because I have one of the top industry regulatory specialists here on today's conversation, which is Mrs. Mo Lovelace. She is the co-chief executive officer at Steinberg and Associates. And guys, she has over 30 years of experience in this industry. Okay. She brings a wealth of knowledge to any size company. So whether you're an indie brand, startup brand, or a global recognized brand, her company is able to assist you to make sure that you're compliant and also helping you with your product registrations. And fun fact, she has 2 degrees. Okay. She has a Bachelor of Technology in Manufacturing and a Bachelor of Science in the food space. So she has solid knowledge based on what it takes to launch your products and packaging out here in the marketplace to be compliant. And so, ladies and gentlemen, make sure y'all give a warm welcome to my regulatory specialist at GLC and also one of my good industry partners, Mrs. Mo Lovelace. So, Mo, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Megan. It was my pleasure to be here.
Yes, I'm so excited for this because every brand that I speak with, they're like, okay, we want to execute this packaging. We want to have all these pretty shiny things in place. However, I'm always asking them, who is your regulatory specialist? Who's the redliner to make sure that you're compliant? Because I don't want my brands to launch products out here and they're not compliant, especially considering the current climate, new regulations that have go into effect, compliance, and brands are wanting to expand into retail, Amazon, all these different areas. So I'm so excited for our conversation today. But before we get started, I did a brief intro on you, but nobody can introduce themselves and put respect on their names like you. So share with our listeners and viewers a little bit about yourself, Mo, and how you got into this regulatory industry.
Well, I have been in actually manufacturing for many, many years, starting from when I graduated from the University of Florida. And
Okay.
then we have, I had jobs with big cosmetic companies. I actually did manufacturing for them. And also I got into regulatory in kind of about the roundabout way. Like a lot of working women, I
Yeah.
became a mother. And then the full-time position just wasn't cutting it for me as far as time is concerned. So they had a position open in regulatory. I took it and just kind of went on from there. So that I
Mhm.
started that job in 2005. So
Okay.
yes, now it's getting on to 25, some almost 30 years of experience doing regulatory.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and I love it. And it's one of those things that I tell people when I tell people that, oh, yeah, I work in the cosmetic industry or I'm a regulatory consultant for the cosmetic industry. The first question I always get, okay, what's the good stuff? What cosmetics are the good stuff? And I would say, no, it really depends on your personal likes and your skin type and what are you trying to achieve. So try different things, but go
Yeah.
with what you have to try and test it out for yourself.
Oh, I feel like I'm doing so many consumer perception studies for myself in this current stage in postpartum season because things that were I was using before is not working the same for me in this season. So,
In that season, that is correct. Because even like exactly, your
yeah.
skin changes. Unfortunately,
Hmm.
we age, but then that's a is a plus.
It's a plus because that means more wisdom. It should be more wisdom, right? But
Yes, yes, yes,
that's what
yes.
they say. Yeah. So it's so true. So okay, Mo. So since you have almost 30 years of experience from manufacturing and into the regulatory industry, you've seen the evolution of manufacturing and also regulatory claims and compliance. And so here in the US, a lot of brands think that we don't have any regulations in place for cosmetics, personal care products, and OTC. And so I would love to hear from your perspective. Is that true?
It,
Do we have regulations in place for USA? And, how can we debunk this for our listeners
we
in the
have
US?
very strict regulations. I guess to back up, the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, which the cosmetic is covered under, and from the
Mm-hmm.
federal regulation point of view, was written in 1938, so a little while ago. There has been some advances in technology and requirements and stuff, but just 2 years ago, there was a Modernization of Cosmetic Regulations Act, MOCRA, as we want to call it, that was passed. And that was the first significant change in the regulatory landscape for cosmetics and what's cosmetics for the US. And with it, it basically put into words, put into action things that have already always been required for cosmetic products, but now
Mm-hmm.
it's in regulation, is in things that companies can adhere to and have set requirements for. So in the past, cosmetic products were not required to be registered with FDA. There was a voluntary program of registering your products to them, but now it's mandatory. So all cosmetic products must be registered with the FDA. There's also requirements for a responsible person. And the definition of responsible person from the US point of view is very different from anywhere else. Responsible person for the US is whoever's listed on that product label. So distributed by Steinberg and Associates, then we are the responsible person. The responsible person has many different responsibilities. They are truly responsible for the safety and efficacy of that product. So any issues that come up with that product from a consumer use, FDA will contact that responsible person to start investigations, start questioning, and get to the bottom of it. And MOCRA also set requirements as far as how you need to receive adverse event reports, how you need to report it, how you need to store it, how the definitions of an adverse events versus a serious adverse event. And all serious adverse events must be reported to the FDA. And on top of that, they also set requirements for safety substantiation for your products. Right now, it's still not a very strict structure of how that
Mm-hmm.
is achieved, mainly because products are so different. Every
Mm-hmm.
product's safety depends on the chemicals that you put into it, your
Mm-hmm.
ingredients, the product type, the application site, the population that is geared for, your packaging itself. And so there's just a lot of parameters that you have to look at. And so to set those standards of what you need to do, what testing that needs to be done is really difficult. So
Mm-hmm.
really the umbrella, which has always been the requirement, that manufacturers are responsible for the safety and efficacy of their products. So it's up to your brand to know exactly what your product is doing and what precautions that you need to provide to the consumer for safe use. So
Okay.
that's always been a big requirement.
Oh, and there's so many. We could talk about just MOCRA for this full episode because there's so many nuances and
Yes.
different things that you have to consider depending upon, like you mentioned, the type of product, etc. But I want to hit on a couple of points. And so now with MOCRA in place that went into effect December, I believe, 2022, we now have the mandatory registration with FDA. So can you speak a little bit more about that? Because really, I'm gonna start. It's gonna be two-part question. So first part is for the startup indie brands that may be working with private label manufacturers or turnkey providers. They want to have a product or a formulation that's already created. They just want to put their branding information on there. So for these startup brands working with private label manufacturers and thinking about MOCRA, what should they be requesting to ensure that that manufacturing facility is registered with the FDA?
Yes, so that's part of the MOCRA requirements. Not only do brands have to register their product, but the
Mhm.
facility that manufactures for them must also be registered with the FDA. And
Okay.
part the registration to FDA, they will be assigned what is called an FEI number, which is FDA Establishment Identifier.
Okay.
They should ask for the FEI number. But a caveat to that is FEI numbers can be assigned to facilities if they're just making OTC products or if they're a food manufacturer. But in order for them to be compliant, they must register as a cosmetic manufacturer. So even if
Okay.
they provide an FEI number to you, it needs to be an FEI number and register as a cosmetic facility. Because
Got
we've come
it.
across a lot of those where, oh yeah, we've got an FEI number. Well, they were making OTCs or they were making medical devices, but they were not registered
Mm,
properly as a cosmetic manufacturer. And if they are not registered properly as a cosmetic manufacturer, that MOCRA registration for your product actually doesn't go through.
Okay, so there's another part to this question before I get back to what to do for the mid and large scale brands. So when you mention about facilities need to have the FDI number, and that's really if they're manufacturing OTC products, over the counter products, versus being registered as a cosmetic facility, I guess my question would be when it comes to OTC products, does MOCRA apply? Or are there different requirements specifically for OTC if a brand is given an FDI number from the facility?
Yes, there's OTC is a separate thing. So
Okay.
that's why they need to be registered as a cosmetic facility as well.
Okay. Got it. Got it. Okay. That's helpful.
Because the
And we'll come
FEI
back
number
around.
once is assigned to a facility, that's their
Mhm.
unique identifier. But basically, it's like, okay, now you have an identifier with the FDA, but what are you registered to do? So, are you doing medical devices? Are you doing food? Are you doing OTCs? Are you doing cosmetics? So you have to kind of check those boxes for
Okay.
all the things that you're doing because
Got it. Okay.
it provides like a chain of connections for the FDA. Okay, we know you're making this product, but
Mhm.
then we also know who's making it for you.
Okay, got it. That's helpful. So thank you. So going back to the question in reference of mandatory registration with FDA, when it comes to mid to large scale brands and companies that are working with the contract manufacturers, should the brands also request, the manufacturing facilities to provide their cosmetic registration
Yeah,
information?
yeah.
And if so, like what traceability or reporting should those scale of businesses obtain from those manufacturing facilities?
Is still the FEI number that they need. So
Okay.
here's a clear delineation. There's responsibilities from the responsible person, the brand side, and there's
Hmm.
responsibility for registration from the manufacturing side. So
Okay.
brands must list their basically the registration involves the ingredients that's in their products with no percentage. You don't have to divulge the percentages. So it's
Okay.
basically almost public knowledge because it's basically your ingredient list that you have on your packaging anyways. So but you're
Okay.
reporting it to the FDA. From the manufacturing side, they have to also list the type of products that they make and the brands that they're supporting. So
Got it.
that's the connection for FDA.
Okay. That's helpful. So thank you for breaking that down. So still continuing on with MOCRA on what you mentioned in reference of adverse versus serious adverse events, because that's now a requirement and documentation is required.
Yes.
So, what recommendations would you give to brands, indie startup brands versus mid to large scale brands, on the documentation that they need to
Yeah.
have in place for reporting?
Unfortunately, there's no delineation from a
Okay.
small brand's responsibility to a mid-sized to large. If the one basic thing, the one most important thing is you should have an SOP in place of
Okay.
how that information is gathered. So there is a MedWatch form as far as what information you need to collect from consumers, but from a standard operating procedure point of view, you should identify, okay, how that information is coming to your facility, to your attention, who's
Mm-hmm.
collecting it, what questions that they need to ask of the consumer, and
Mm-hmm.
also, then that's the chain of how it is reviewed internally, and who's
Mm-hmm.
deciding, okay, does this meet an adverse event or a serious adverse event? So adverse events could be anything. People calling
Okay.
in to say, I don't like your product, and because it made me itch a little bit and stuff, but I
Mm.
stopped using it, I'm fine. That's just an adverse event. A
Okay.
serious adverse event has a set definition from FDA, and it is serious. It's things like
Mm-hmm.
hospitalization, disfigurement, infections, things that require, medical attention, and, and ultimately death, of course, is a part of that
Okay.
definition. And those serious adverse events must be reported to FDA. And now they just launched a new portal for automatic reporting. And you put that report into the FDA. However, all adverse events also needs to be recorded, and also
Mm-hmm.
need to be the records kept in the safe place, because part of MOCRA also states that FDA has the authority to request those records and to review
Mm.
what's on with it.
Okay. Oh, okay. So now I'm going deeper in the rabbit hole with this question, with this point. So with adverse events, the reporting is required, and there's no delineation between startup indie brands and large scale brands. So
Correct.
noted. So
Okay.
when it comes to the documentation and the reporting, because FDA may say, "Hey, I'm gonna just say Jane. Hey Jane, we now need to obtain your documentation of this X product from 2 years ago." So my question would be, how long should brands retain those records, for adverse events versus serious adverse events reported?
Okay, and so there is a little bit of a time difference between small companies and the medium-sized companies as far as
Okay.
record keeping. And I do believe, and I have to double check the time on that, Megan, but I
Okay.
do believe for smaller companies is 3 years, larger companies is 6 years.
Got it. Okay.
But there
And
is a
that's
little bit of
helpful.
delineation for that.
Okay. And then second question on adverse versus serious adverse events. When you have a serious adverse event, how quickly does that need to be submitted in the portal with FDA?
15 days.
15
You have
days
15
from the
days. That is set.
time. Okay. I'm sorry, go ahead.
That is per MOCRA.
Okay. Is that 15 days from the date of incident or 15 days from when it was reported to the brand?
When you have knowledge of it, and when you
Okay.
have all the information collected, that's the clock starts ticking.
And is it 15 business days or 15 calendar days?
I do believe it's 15 calendar days.
Got it. Okay. And so brands and viewers, you're seeing why I'm asking this level of detail, because Mo and her team at Steinberg and Associates are looking at this and also helping the brands and founders, think about this, and if they are assigned the responsible person for the brand, et cetera. So their details with Steinberg and Associates is down in the show notes. So make sure you do visit their website to get involved with them, because I personally believe every brand should have a regulatory specialist, regardless of what scale of brand you are. Personally, you need a redliner in your life, and they are that redliner team. And so Mo helps me redline a lot of things for the clients that and projects that I work with them on. So everybody needs a redliner to help stay compliant out here. Because
And
as you see, just with MOCRA, there's so many complexities and nuances that we're just hitting the surface level. This is not the full layer of
no,
everything.
not at all.
So, Okay, so thank you for answering my questions about MOCRA. And I know we could talk about MOCRA all day, and there's going to be some continued conversation in these upcoming questions. And so, as we're now talking about MOCRA and recapping 2025 and now being in 2026, what have been some of the top regulations that have gone into effect for 2025 that brands need to make sure they have in place in this current year, 2026?
So one of the, again, going back to MOCRA, because there's
Hmm.
still several provisions in MOCRA that FDA hasn't quite gotten their act together, basically. So
Okay.
one of the big changes is requiring the listing of your fragrance allergens on your artwork.
Mm.
So that, fragrance allergens has been a requirement for EU and Canada now for a while.
Okay.
EU forever. And most people may be familiar with the 26 allergens that was initially listed for reporting and labeling purposes, but
Mhm.
EU extended the allergen list to 81 allergens
Really?
this past year. So for the US, they have not decided yet whether they just going to start with the 26 or go no full in on the 81. They were supposed to provide that list this year. The last update that we got through the IBA convergence meeting was that we should expect something final from them, excuse me, spring of 2026.
Okay.
That's not to say that once they give you the list, they're going to say, okay, you're going to need your labels be
Yeah.
included. The labels to be revised and include all the allergens that needs to be listed. They'll give you a transition period and stuff. And
Okay.
usually transition periods of this type is usually a year to 18 months. So, I don't have the crystal ball for this
I
yet.
understand. Yeah.
But just to let people know if they haven't gotten allergens listed on their products, that's a coming thing for 26, and that's impactful for all brands. Just think about all the artwork revisions that
Yeah.
people need to have, right?
Well, yes. Okay. So that's
So
the first one. So
that is the
listening
biggest.
fragrance.
That is the biggest one, and and
Okay.
and kind of coincident, or going along with that, favorite state of California has been, even though the allergens are not required to be listed on your allergens are not required to be on your labels. California has required the reporting of those allergens through their Safe Cosmetic Act, and under the newer provision to that of the Fragrance and Flavors Right to Know Act. So
Oh, wow.
even if you haven't been listing allergens on your labels, California had wanted you to provide registration of the ingredients of the allergens to them.
So interesting. So, okay. So with MOCRA, we now have the product registration, manufacturing facility registrations, but now brands would need to register, if there are any fragrances or allergens with the state of California and their separate portals. So there could be two separate registration processes
Correct.
occurring.
Correct.
Wow. Okay.
Correct. And California is the big one with no product registrations.
Really? And is that something that you all offer as a service?
We
Because
do.
I
We
could
do.
see this being a little challenging, especially for like startup indie brands more so. I mean, any scale of brand, to be honest, but the startup indie brands, because a lot of them think, I don't need a regulatory specialist. When
Yeah.
should I hire one? I'm like, now. If you're creating products, you need to hire them now. Because it's better to invest in the redliners upfront as part of your development to ensure you're compliant before you're creating all these formulations and buying packaging and labeling and
Yes.
all these things. You need to make sure you're compliant first for the markets. And
Yep.
and a lot of indie brands think it's the opposite. You
No.
know.
And I think that's one of the questions that I always get is, when should we involve regulatory and stuff?
Hmm.
To me, for especially small companies that are just starting up, because you may or may not have experience in this space already. But so you have an idea, you have something you want to create and stuff,
Yeah.
and you work with chemists and stuff to develop a formulation and everything.
Hmm.
And everything is, oh, I love this. This is exactly what I want. However, if you can't bring it to market because you have ingredients in there that are not compliant, that bubble is busted pretty quickly.
Right. Right.
So to me, it's you if you have, well, a couple of things, because a lot of times you may work with an R&D group. They're just all concerned about making a product that you like, right?
Yeah.
From a regulatory standpoint, that's not their first priority and stuff. However, I think talking through with them to let them know what markets you're thinking of going into. And retail, retail blacklist is also a rising thing for many companies.
Yeah.
They want to be Sephora clean. They want to be Walmart clean. They want to be Target clean. So all those, are taking into place. So have that conversation with those R&D people, or, even if you're going into a contract manufacturer and you just, okay, this is close enough to what I want. If they have,
Yeah.
stock formulations, you still need to have that conversation with them of where you want to market to. Because to me, if
Mhm.
that formulation needs to be tweaked somehow, to your point, you don't want to go into testing, you don't want to go into packaging
Yeah.
and stuff until you know that that formulation is good to go wherever you are looking to market it. So no,
Yeah.
engage in services like what we offer, and just kind of that ounce of prevention, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Will could save you lots of headaches down the road.
Absolutely. And all of our information is down in the show notes. So if you're working with me, GLC, regulatory is part of our required services. Like it's non-negotiable now because we want brands to ensure that they are compliant from the beginning. It also helps protect me and my company as well. But at the end of the day, we all want to see you succeed. And then Steinberg and Associates information will be down in there as well. So if you need a responsible person helping with product registration, especially like in the state of California, the good old state of California,
Good old state of California.
they can help you with that. So all the information is down in the show notes for you all. Okay, so we talked about some of the top regulation standards that went into effect for 2025 that will impact brands in 2026. And you talked about how brands are wanting to use all these different ingredients with, direct cosmetic chemists, R&D team, et cetera, but not thinking about regulations. So my question is, well, let me rewind. So, as part of that, we now have state and federal mandates that could have differences with ingredients. So, like the state of California now requiring brands to register their products with any known fragrances or allergens.
Yeah.
So, my question is when it comes to federal and state mandates and bans around ingredients, et cetera, how would you advise brands on assessing the risk level of what type of ingredients they should or should not be using when they're working with R&D team, cosmetic chemists, etc., to make them be compliant?
Lack of federal preemption for a lot of things is a big problem because
Yeah,
many states right now have their own ban restricted list of ingredients.
yeah,
They are very similar, but sometimes some may have a little different level. Some may have different product categories this applies to. So there's no
yeah,
uniformity in these
right.
regulations, which
Which
is
makes it
a
challenging.
huge headache.
Yeah,
But we are in our formal reviews to our clients, we capture all those from a state level to the federal level. And from an ingredient standpoint, the PFAS thing is still a big thing.
yeah,
PFAS is banned in 2 states right now, 3 states. Formaldehyde and formaldehyde releasers are banned. There's a very low limit for lead in your cosmetic products in Washington. There's a very low one for dioxane for ethoxylated ingredients in New York. So there's
hmm,
a lot of ingredient issues that brands need to be aware of when they're doing their formulations. And that's why, you could say there's not a all encompassing list of say, okay,
yeah,
don't formulate with these. So
got
it
it.
really is mixed to once you get to where you are, okay, this is what I like. Let's do a review to see what issues these ingredients may come up with.
Yeah, and that's so true because even when we partnered together on some of my clients' projects, like the level of detail that is provided when you're looking at USA, if you're considering
Canada, EU.
EU, UK, Mexico, Asia, like it's like all over. And I'm like, I'm just trying to focus on, and just looking at one section for the USA, I'm like, I'm a little overwhelmed. Mo and the team, like, I have questions, just on USA. And we're not even talking about all other countries, just USA, because to your point, like you educated me on one of my clients, like with New York, in reference of like the one parts per million, I think with the 1,4-dioxane,
Hmm.
with if it's a leave on versus if it's a rinse off and what goes into effect for New York, in 2026. So like I'm learning a lot of things, and shout out to IBA. If you're not a member with IBA, please become a member. I am one. Mo has been a board of director with them in the past. They have a lot of great resources
They
available
do.
to everybody. And I learn something from them every single time I go into the website, attend a webinar, etc. And Mo does too. We're always staying a student because there's so many changes
Yes.
happening in the space to make sure that y'all are compliant
Yeah.
and trying to stay on track of all the changes. So I'm like, Mo, what's the new change for today? Because it could
Yeah.
be different from yesterday.
They just had their fall convergence meeting, and I was telling Megan, it covered many, many areas that if you listen and you try to take to heart, you may be very disheartened, but at least this information that you need to know and kind of make a business decisions on.
Yeah, because that's going to assess the risk level, what markets you possibly want to offer your product into, and that should be talked about from the beginning as part of like ideation R&D stage, for the brand. Also, what type of packaging you should consider, because not only do you have the ingredient standpoint, you also now have packaging regulations and
Yes.
differences,
The
like with packaging, extended producer responsibility, what organizations can help you with that. We're navigating a lot of different regulations and guidelines in this current
Yes.
environment, which
And EPR,
overwhelming.
it is the next, as far as going moving forward. EPR is going to be this a very huge
It's
responsibility
huge.
for brands. So
It's huge.
if for those who may not understand what EPR is, so it's extended producer responsibilities, and it's
Mm-hmm.
basically shifting the responsibility of end of life for packaging. And
Mm-hmm.
not only, here's the thing that I learned too, it's not only packaging that you see on the store shelves. It's not like your cartons and your bottles. It's also your tertiary, your shipping
Yep.
containers. I mean,
Yep.
it is all of that that they're looking
Everything.
at. So and from what I understand, no, we are not EPR specialists, but no, again, good to know so we could direct our clients to people who can help further and kind of dig down in the nitty gritties with them. But it's there's several requirements. So first, you have to identify that your product applies, and as cosmetics, you apply,
Yeah.
and then you have to have a reporting obligation, and then you have to, of course, pay fees based on
Yep.
those reporting amounts. And then the fourth one is also looking at your packaging and trying to hit some goals that they have set for reducing plastic or things that are
Yep.
materials that are hard to recycle and things like
Yep.
that. So there's like the four tiers and stuff. And of course, here's again, there's no federal preemption. There are
Yep.
7 states right now that have EPR ruling, and those 7 states, are those
All
cohesive?
different.
No,
Yep.
they're all
They're all
different.
different. Yeah.
They're all different.
Yeah.
So getting to understand what the need is, or what the requirement is, and that's one of my big stand up on the soapbox and yell at these legislators and things like that. It's not like we don't want to
Yeah.
comply. We just need a clear understanding how to
That
comply
part.
one
That
one
that part.
time, and not through all these little state things.
We have 50 states here in America, and
Yes, and
even here, you know what I'm saying? Like even in Florida, where you are, and Georgia, where I am, we're neighboring states. However, there's differences, in reference of recyclability for packaging as part of packaging EPR. There's
yes,
resources down in the show notes for you all, like Sustainable Packaging Coalition, Circular Alliance, and more. So resources down in the show notes for you all to learn more about this packaging EPR and the impact and financial implications. Look at the show notes.
yeah,
But as part of that, like here in Georgia, I live in the suburbs outside of Atlanta versus city of Atlanta. We recycle differently.
yeah,
Our curbside of recycling is different as part of packaging EPR to the type of products that we do receive and can ship out. If it's going to California versus Rhode Island versus Washington versus Florida, they're all different. So to your point, there's no uniformity.
There's
We are
no
having to think about where is it going from a state level to then looking at the ingredients, looking at the packaging, looking at recyclability, then looking at what claims can we put on the label. So it's like WTF, like what do I put? I don't know. you know. So and
and
we're laughing together because it's like we're laughing to keep from crying almost because there's so many complexities and things that we have to really be mindful of to help the
yes.
brands be compliant. And it's overwhelming. And so I know it's overwhelming for the brands. And so as you're eating the elephant one bite at a time, with this being your specialty, what piece of advice would you give brands who are new to this space, creating their, you know, creating their products? They're thinking about all these claims that they want to have in place for their formulas and ingredients, but they're at the very beginning. Like, what piece of advice would you give them on navigating this environment, this climate?
Well, and when you're talking about claims, the cornerstone of the claims for both from the FDA and the FTC standpoint is your
Mm-hmm.
claims should always be truthful and not
Mm-hmm.
misleading. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and we talk through this with clients all the time. The stronger your claims are, the stronger your data to support that claim should be,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
There's a big difference between saying my product moisturizes versus my product moisturizes for 72 hours and makes
Mm-hmm.
you look 10 years younger type thing.
Yeah.
So, and testing can be very expensive. However, you should understand that your product will do what you say it will do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's very important to kind of understand you may not be able to make those claims that will require more robust testing, at least some sort of consumer use test, consumer perception test, which those types of tests are less expensive and you could run it
Mm-hmm.
in conjunction with many things that you want to try to say about your product and stuff. And
Yeah.
what's also important too is not okay. So you have the claims, you have all these things too, but a couple of things that we always advise our clients and stuff, because your story, your philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
So many
Mm-hmm.
people want to say my product is clean, but as you know, clean does not have any kind of federal or even state definition for it.
Mm.
So it's important for consumers to understand what do you mean by clean? Because
That
we've
part.
had many clients that when our products are clean, then they get hit with a lawsuit. Well, you say your product is clean, but you have this ingredient that's known to blah 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 blah. So, but
Mm.
if you clearly identify what your philosophy is, what you think, what you understand to be clean, and how
Yeah.
you formulated your product based on that philosophy, people can
Mm-hmm.
read through it. If they want to buy in with it with you or and join you on that journey,
Yeah.
great. But
Yeah.
it is everybody's on the same page about it.
Yeah. Oh, we could do a whole nother episode just on ingredients around clean versus natural and all of that, because a lot of brands, from what I've seen, and I'm sure you've seen more of it because this is your specialty, but a lot of people like, I want to be clean. I want to use all natural ingredients. Okay, like what does
Natural
that
does not
mean?
mean
And I feel like that's that emotional marketing jargon, where it's like
yes.
hitting that consumer, I'm saying targeting the consumer from a marketing standpoint. So that's emotional claims, but it's not substantiated by any means, and so I do have to ask you this question just around clean and natural ingredients with your experience in manufacturing. What is your take on brands saying ingredients are natural or clean? Do you think that it's all fluff in marketing, or do you think that there are some clean and natural ingredients that can be used, but it depends upon what it like the content of what that ingredient is, like if it's essential oils that's used or etc.
But so a good example of that is people will say, "Oh, I don't have fragrance. Fragrances contain chemicals and stuff." Well, what do you
Hmm.
think I mean, the fragrances are made of? They're made of essential oils from plants. So
Yeah.
those chemicals, at least, a lot of times those chemicals are refined out. So that's the one chemical. that you're putting into it.
Yeah.
But for if you truly are using a plant is made up of many components. So
Hmm.
you don't know exactly what all the components of a plant has.
That's true.
So that's why people do refine those ingredients so they can two things. They know exactly what's going into it, and second
Hmm.
of all, they could have consistency with the products. Because if you just look at the vegetables and stuff that you eat, right? One apple from the other is not going to be exactly the same,
The
right?
same.
Even though
Right.
it's apples to apples, because the
Yeah,
apple is made up of so many different things in it and stuff.
that's true.
So, but if you extract one thing from the apple and that one ingredient is what you're using for that, that what that one ingredient is.
Yeah.
So to me, that's yes, you could say clean, but clean does not mean safe. And I think for most consumers, is the safety of the product that they're concerned with, right?
Yeah. And I think that's a valid point because now with a lot of consumers using TikTok and looking at TikTok as the end to be all, I'm not here to throw shade at TikTok. I don't have one. I don't even know how to use it. However, a lot of brands are incorporating TikTok, and so the audience on TikTok is really leveraging people, influencers that are saying, "Oh, this product is clean. This product is all natural. This product is safe to use." And it's like you don't even they have no credentials to validate if a product is clean slash natural versus safe. You need to be going to the source and going back to the source of truth and understanding what's the documentation in place. And that's what Mo mentioned earlier, in reference to the brands and what they should have in place.
Yeah.
And so, speaking of documentation and validation of claims, going back to what you mentioned, like starting with R&D, cosmetic chemists, understanding your marketplace of where you're launching your products into, and understand what intended claims you would like to make, right? What should brands have in place when it comes to claims before they finalize their formula? Should they have like a claims matrices, a list of like their intended claims, so that way they have something to give that manufacturer or R&D team,
Of course.
to then give to you all? Like, what would you recommend?
And then not just from a regulatory standpoint, but from efficacy standpoint. If these are
Mm,
the things you want your product to be to provide, the
hmm.
benefits that your product provides, well, there
Hmm.
are ingredients that will provide that benefit. It's kind of looking at like
Yeah.
cooking. So if you know that you want to add salt to make it taste better, so you want to have use salt, right?
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
at the end of the day, you still have to taste it to see, you
Yeah.
got enough salt in there or whatever and
That's
stuff.
true. That's
So
true.
from a ingredient standpoint, you want these efficacies. The R&D people could say, okay, I could use this and this and this. This one, and we could talk about this a little bit too. This ingredient has data to support that it provides moisturization for 24 hours, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
However, you really can't say without testing that my product provides 24 hours moisturization. So
Hmm.
even though the testing has been done on the ingredient, you don't know what all, once you put in all the other ingredients like cooking, how that affects the final product. You
Yeah.
better taste it, right, in order to say, okay, I think I'm good, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
on in your in products, okay, let's try it and test it and see that we do have the 24-hour moisturization.
And testing, that's where you mentioned earlier, either invest in doing the consumer perception testing or invest into the clinical testing.
In instrumentation and again, the stronger your claim, the more robust your data needs to be. That's
Got it. That's it. I mean, y'all, and ladies and gentlemen, I've talked about on previous episodes, like with Cynthia Johnson, who's a cosmetic chemist at Cindy J Labs, and other episodes prior to this one. We talk about the importance of testing. Like, and that's something I always ask the brands: do you have testing in place before my designer puts any information on your packaging label, before we work with any printer to produce your packaging? Do you have any documentation to substantiate the testing and the claims that you're making? Because you're not coming after us for this, and it hasn't been vetted and cleared with regulatory first,
yeah.
before we move forward. So In the microphone.
And I could tell you a horror story. I mean, some many horror stories, but just an
Sure.
example. Again, with our wonderful state of California, they
Yeah.
have litigations against people that making things like instant moisturization. That I've had clients that have gotten 60-day notice. Not 60-day, but lawsuits, letters to say,
Mm,
okay, we have someone that used your product and they did not feel instant moisturization. So
wow.
as much as simple as that.
Wow. Yeah, that's important. That is important because there's, like you said, there's so many complexities, and I don't think brands truly understand the impact of making these claims up front and having all this marketing collateral and jargon and social platforms, etc., to make these claims, which is more emotional versus data driven, to really substantiate that. Because nobody wants to get hit with a lawsuit. Okay, that's
That is
nobody wants to have that.
no,
None of
and
us.
even and if you because here's the thing: if you ignore it, you'll get taken to court. If you
Yeah.
engage a lawyer to fight them, then that still costs you money.
Yep.
So it's one of those you can't win. So have and if so you have substantiation for it, you could just say, hey, this is what we tested, and this is
Yeah.
based on this is the claims are based on this.
Yeah. Oh, because we could talk about that all day on a whole nother episode. We could have a whole podcast series just on regulatory because there's so many complexities to it. And I'm always staying a student to learn myself. So I'm like, noted. Like, okay, I need to make sure we have this in place. But that's why I have you and your team, part of my
Yeah.
team. So that helps as well. Okay. So we're in our final questions. We probably have three more considering time. So packaging label compliance in 2026. What would be the top three areas or things brands cannot afford to cut corners on?
There's no as far as labeling concerned, there
Mm-hmm.
are several required elements that you must have on your products. That's product
Mm-hmm.
ID, your net quantity, directions for safe use, warnings for safe use, the manufacturer address, and under MOCRA, you also must have either a domestic address, a domestic phone number, or an electronic contact for people to report adverse events. So,
Mm.
so that's key.
Okay.
So all those elements must be on your packaging. And then and there's placements and like your principal display panel has to have, but those things have always been required. The only thing that MOCA added to it was the domestic address, domestic phone number, or web address.
Okay, so question on that. So with the domestic address, electronic information, and contact domestic phone number being listed on the product label, when it comes to the electronic, I guess, form or website that's available, do brands need to have a like an actual form that consumers can submit their information on for any
They
adverse event, or is there any guidelines?
No, well, FDA has not provided, like, say, you got to have, electronic contact, and then your website needs to have things. But I think from a
Gotcha.
common sense standpoint, if they go to your website, you should at least have, contact information clearly
Got it.
identified. Go here for contact information, or some brands have also added a tab on their on their website for adverse events reporting.
Got it. Okay. Got it. Okay, next question. So, looking ahead at 2026 and the next 2 years, what is in store for first segment, first audience, indie and startup brands versus second audience, mid to large scale companies?
Mid brands, I hate to burst bubbles and stuff because
Yeah,
that's for new and innovations and things like that. Indie brands
yeah,
are the key, right?
yeah.
But as from a regulatory standpoint, there is no delineation between small companies and large companies. MOCRA does provide an exemption for small businesses that hasn't
Okay,
reached $1 million sales. However,
okay.
if you are getting products from overseas, we highly recommend that you comply with the MOCA registration just to
Yeah.
eliminate any issues in customs. Because
Mm,
we've had clients also that had their products stopped customs because they haven't gotten the MOCA registrations done correctly.
So that's why it's important for the brands to request for their cosmetic registration up front so they to help. Okay. Got it.
Yes. So no, all the registration part of it from the MOCRA standpoint. Also, as we just talked about, all states are having all these requirements
Yeah.
as far as registration and reporting requirements, and it's a lot. It is a lot, and some of the EPR does have small business thresholds too.
Hmm.
So, but again, I would check. And it's one of those things. Yeah, good. I'm a small business. I don't have to comply. But isn't as a business, you want to reach that standpoint, no, that point where you got to imply because you want to grow your
Exactly.
business.
Exactly. And I
So
always
the more you
recommend,
understand it now, the
right.
better prepared you are.
And to your point, a lot of indie and startup brands have these big goals of wanting to expand onto Amazon and into, retailer stores within the next 2 years as well. And so they're like, well, I don't need to be compliant now. I'm like, no, you need to. Me personally, I believe every brand should start being compliant now, regardless of what stage they're in, because as your brand is growing and evolving, you already understand what the compliance guidelines are, what regulations you need to consider, what's the next steps, so it may be a phased approach to what regulations and requirements you need to have in place respectfully for your brand, and depending upon the type of product, that's why you hire us to help you with that, but you should be starting now at
Yeah,
the end of the
and
day.
it's also important for your brand image. You don't want to be a
Hmm.
brand that has no warning letters associated with you from the FDA.
Exactly. Oh, because that could be a whole nother thing on what you don't want to have in place. And that's cost, and that comes with more dollar bills that's being imposed to the brands that
Yep,
you do not want to spend.
yep.
Okay.
Yep,
Okay.
and maybe, and that's probably the other thing that I always advise small brands too: conquer U.S. first, and then look into the future. Because as you move out from the U.S., there are just so many different more requirements that you need. So conquer
Mhm.
U.S., build your business on what's here, and then could look into going elsewhere.
I think that's a valid point, Mo, because like startup brands are like, I want to go into Sephora and I want to go into Canada and Mexico and all these other places. And it's like, that's great. But like you mentioned, there's so many things happening in the US and there's no uniformity, no one standard for all 50 states here in the US. We have to think about every state individually,
Yeah,
so it's a lot to deal with even here. So that's a
yeah.
very valid point.
Yeah, and then and from a packaging standpoint, once you go out of the U.S., you have all the language requirements, and that as you've our latest project here, you have so much text on something you're trying to make aesthetically pleasing. That's
Yeah.
not going to happen because
Yeah.
cram two, three
All
different texts on
things. Or we're having fun with this current project we're on now with that. But
there.
we're figuring out how to make it work for it to be compliant for both markets. So to that point, me and Mo are working together to figure out, okay, how do we make sure it's compliant, not only from a packaging standpoint with me and my team, but also ingredients, cosmetic, OTC products, et cetera, for the different markets. So we're juggling a lot of things simultaneously. But at the end of the day, we're
And
making
make it
sure.
look good. And make it look good.
I mean, just like us, we come looking good on certain
Yep.
days. We come looking good on this episode, right? But when we're working, it's ponytail. We may not be on camera. I may be holding on Maya, or whatever. But we making sure the brands look good at the end of the day. And
Exactly.
so, last question for you, Mo. So, if we were to give brands a 2026 regulatory survival checklist, what would be the first three items on it?
Call me.
That part. So that's number one. Call Mo. It's Steinberg Associates. Information in the show
Yes.
notes for you. So you don't have to go anywhere. I got you. Show notes. Okay, so that's one. And okay, I'm gonna do my second plug. Hire GLC for your
Yes.
packaging needs. And Mo and her team are part of our services as well. So that's two. Okay, so that's number one
And
and number
then
two.
and join IBA.
And join IBA. IBA's information is down in the show notes for you all. So shout out to IBA, Independent Beauty Association. They have a
Yes.
lot of great content, a lot of great webinars, and helping
And
us.
their membership dues are very, very reasonable.
They're very reasonable. Very reasonable. So if you have not invested into that brand, into that organization, do so today. It is like $1.56 or something like that, $1.60 a day. When you look at it across 365 days, it is worth it. Well, it depends upon your revenue, of course, but that's the starting investment. Like we talked about registration and all those things earlier. So, Mo, this was so good. And one thing I will ask this is my final question to you. With your 30 years of experience in manufacturing and regulatory industry, in 7 seconds or less, how would you describe the regulatory climate over the past 30 years?
It has grown exponentially,
Okay.
especially for ingredients, for and I think more than anything else is because the consumers have gotten so they're educated consumers. They know what they want,
Yeah.
so they're looking for those things and
Yeah.
such. So regulatory has to kind of keep pace with that, right? To okay,
Hmm.
people are not buying this because of this, so we need to look at and see what we can do and stuff. Smart consumers are kind of driving a lot of this as well.
We have a lot of consumer trends right now. We didn't even hit on that today because that could be a whole nother topic on consumer trends. But I guess we did hit on it, clean and natural
Yeah,
ingredients a little bit. But
correct.
that's still a big thing. Absolutely. So that's a very valid point. And it's continuing to grow exponentially too because of all the
Hmm.
regulation and guidelines that are in place just for US. So we
Yes.
shall see what is to come in this year.
Right.
Buckle up, ladies and gentlemen, because we are on for the ride. And I hope you are ready for this roller coaster ride that we are on today and ongoing as we navigate these lovely guidelines in place, but they have been in place for quite some time, like Mo mentioned at the beginning of our episode too. So, newness change is always hard, but once
Yes.
we have it figured out and we start finding our rhythm, it'll start to smooth out as we're starting to land at our ending position, like a
And I
roller
think
coaster.
one thing I think is, from cosmetics has always been kind of a products. I would not say personal care as well. Cosmetic personal care products have never been really affected by economic changes, right?
Hmm.
Even if when there's high inflation, when all these tariffs and things like that is in place, people are still going to buy their personal care products, the makeup that they
Absolutely,
want, the lipstick that they
absolutely.
love. So we have, even through COVID, we were our company was very steady through it all
We weren't
because people
impacted
were
like that.
still. It's
Yeah.
not going to be one of those things. It's going to be always with us, and it's always going to be some kind of new things coming through.
Absolutely, because everybody's using, well, I don't want to say everybody, but majority of people are using lotion to help moisturize and hydrate their skin.
Yeah.
So you still are using soap. Most of us,
Yep.
I don't want to say everybody takes a bath because a whole nother topic, but most people are taking a bath, that practice good, safe hygiene.
Yeah.
So soap, lotion, all those things are
Toothpaste.
basic needs.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So plus the makeup, lipstick, nails, like you and I, we both love our nails in different nail colors. Yes, I like that color. Oh, I'm gonna ask you offline what that color is. I may need that for holidays. But to that point, our industry is not going to be heavily impacted. We're continuously growing, and everybody's looking for what's the next thing for this current stage and current season of their lives. Like myself
Hmm.
in postpartum,
Yep.
I'm still exploring what's happening and what's working best for me. So I love that. So Mo, thank you so much for sharing. And as we are wrapping up for today's episode, we do our final power round with every guest that we have here on the show. So we put 90 seconds on the clock and we
Oh,
ask our
okay.
guests about fun facts, that they shared with us. And so we're going to put 90 seconds on the clock and ask Mo about some of her fun facts that she shared with me, which is she's an avid tennis player and fan. Okay. And she is a new grandmother as well to her grandson, who she adores. Okay. He is the cutest as well. So 90 seconds on the clock. And Mo, you ready for your power round?
Sure.
You got this. Let's go. So, as an avid tennis player and fan, I want you to answer these following questions. Who is your favorite tennis player right now and why?
Yannick Sinner.
Okay.
Actually, I think he's number two. Carlos surpassed him. Yannick, just because his demeanor on court and off court are
Okay.
things that I think people in general could aspire to. He's very even
Mm,
keel. He never seems to blow out, because of a point went
okay.
bad and stuff. And from what I understand, he's very family oriented, and he supports his family through his tennis now.
Oh, I love that. Okay. So, as an avid tennis player, do you prefer playing singles or doubles?
Honey, at this stage in my life, definitely doubles.
No, that's right. Okay, you're not going for Wimbledon. Okay, you're not going for the Wimbledon. No.
No.
Okay. But you're still out there. That's what matters most.
Yep,
Okay.
I play probably about 3 times a week at least.
Oh, that's amazing. I love
So,
that.
yeah.
Okay. Don't ask me to be your double because I can't help you with that. Okay. Do you love the energy of a morning or a night match?
Oh gosh, definitely morning.
Morning.
We have courts here that, in fact, I played last night under the lights, and I'm telling you, just the lights put so much difference in the shadows, and like I still get those what they call the little
Like
halos around things and
the
stuff.
raccoon eyes.
Yeah, it's whole different. I'd rather have natural light. So
I know that's
definitely,
right. Look, we look better in natural light versus
that's
artificial
true
light.
too. That's
So,
true too.
just to highlight that. Okay, so family means everything to you. So, since you're a new grandparent, what is the best part about being a grandparent?
Oh gosh, two things I think. One is it's kind of seen. One is similar. One is seeing the world through his eyes again. Right,
Mm,
everything is a wonder. He was staring at these black and white pictures for 20 minutes the other day and just
yeah.
talking to himself about it and stuff. And it's
Aw.
like, what is he saying? What he's trying to communicate and stuff,
Yeah.
right? And then,
Oh.
second of all, seeing my daughter becoming a mother and being so
Yeah.
nurturing to this little baby and stuff, and just the she'll kill me for saying, but she was my wild child. She was, very headstrong. She still is, but
Yeah.
now seeing her with this baby and that, her whole world is evolving around him.
Oh, I love that. My mom recently told me the same thing too. She was like, I just love watching you be a mother to your daughter.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
so I think it's universal. It seems like that's universal with every grandparent.
Yes, I think, as your child, you see them, you wish for them to be responsible people, right?
Yeah.
And to give of themselves, right?
Yeah.
And put others before themselves. And with a child, you have to do that.
You have to. I didn't to have my daughter. I know we're still on a power round, but just had to add this. Like with having my daughter, birthing my daughter, and becoming a mom and evolving as a mom. Like the world is so different. Things I prioritized before, I'm like,
Mhm.
those things don't
Yep,
matter. Like
yep,
it's all about her,
yep.
And my viewers and listeners, y'all remember when I came back from maternity leave and I did my first episode holding and rocking her in my arms on the episode. To now she's talking and standing and walking. It's just amazing. So, oh my gosh, shout out to your daughter, and kudos to her as a mom. From one mama to the next, we're figuring out as we go with the sleepless nights and the bags under our eyes. Okay. All right. So back to the power round. So since family means everything to you, you've been married for 36 years. What advice would you share with your grandson on having a strong, healthy marriage?
Communication,
Okay.
and the secret to our long marriage: separate bedrooms.
Okay. Got it.
You
Hey,
get a good night's sleep, and you could conquer the world.
I know that's right. Listen, okay. Y'all hear that? 36 years. Okay. So, last question for Power Round. So, regulatory compliance is essential for products in packaging because fill in the blank.
An ounce of prevention will save you a whole lot of money at the other end.
Ooh, y'all heard that. That's a great way to end out the episode. An ounce of prevention will save you a whole lot of money on the back end for the products and the packaging. So I love that. So, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard from Mrs. Mo Lovelace here, who is the co-chief executive officer at Steinberg and Associates that will help you get compliant for all your market needs and help you with product registration and oversee everything for you as well with her firm. So all of her information is down in the show notes, and she's also part of my regulatory team here at GLC as well. So you can get engaged with either one of us. We're gonna make sure that you're compliant from the packaging to the ingredients for your formulation to launch in the USA and beyond. But we just talked about USA today, and as Mo said, an ounce of prevention will help save you a lot of money on the back end. So let's save some dollars because everything costs a lot more today. But let's save some dollars and get compliant today. So thank y'all so much for tuning in to today's episode. Make sure you do follow, like, and subscribe to all of our platforms. And make sure to share this with at least 5 people in your network because our net worth is based upon our network. So we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks, Mo.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.